And I will now turn it over to Anagha to share her thoughts, and then we'll get your questions ready for her.
All right. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I see just a couple of people probably with their videos on. Feel free to open up your videos. I want to make sure that I'm not talking to a black wall, but at the same time, it's perfectly fine if you're not able to at this point. I would like to make it more interactive. So um, feel free to stop me and ask questions as you feel necessary. Um, all right, so let's dive into the presentation. My name is Anagha Kalvade. As Tracy mentioned, I have bachelor's and master's degree from electrical engineering, and I've worked in semiconductor industry for 24 years. I got my MBA from UNC Kenan-Flagler in 2022 in the concentration of sustainability and entrepreneurship. And I currently work at Total Impact Capital. My focus has been in impact strategy, impact framework, and different measurements of impact. I'm also vice president of Food Diversity, which is a nonprofit. We work on the intersection of food allergies and food insecurity, especially for kids. And I have been a yoga instructor for 20 plus years, doing as a community service, and I coach several STEM competitions, including robotics. Today, I would like to cover different topics that are related to impact investment. So first of all, I would like to cover blended finance, role of blended finance and impact investment, which is very important to understand, and then some examples of blended finance, what I have seen at my workplace, theory of change, impact thesis, and how do you do impact measurement and management. I understand that Jeff is going to cover that, and I feel this is a very important topic when we start talking about impact investment. So we all know the definition of blended finance, which is it combines the catalytic capital that comes from public or philanthropic sources with private capital in a single structure that accommodates the different risk and return and impact goals of each actor. And when I say each actor, since we're getting financing sources from different players, it can be commercial or private capital, or it can be development or concessional capital coming from public or philanthropic sources. The intention of this capital can be different, but its main objective is to encourage more private capital to invest in solutions to major social and environmental problems by moving the needle on the private funder risk and return calculation. And again, as I said, that we are using the commercial as well as the developmental or concessional capital to create financial structure, which is called blended finance. And then the use of this finance is towards UN SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. So if you want to explore blended finance, you need to make sure that impact is at the center of the focus to build the buy-in and create partnerships, the partnerships between, as I said, commercial or private capital, partnership between development and concessional capital um, for the success of this blended vehicle. So through blended finance, we try to create new deal structures as long as the top level principle is how are we maximizing for impact. So, one thing that we all should understand is that blended finance is a structuring approach and it's not an investment approach. Um, blended finance allows organizations with different objectives, as I mentioned earlier. It can, like public, private, philanthropic sources, to invest alongside each other while achieving their own objectives of it can be financial return, social impact, or a blend of both. The main investment barriers for private investors are high risk and poor returns. related to their comparable investments. And these barriers are basically addressed by blended finance vehicles. Um, they create investable opportunities in developing countries, which lead to a much more development impact. My company primarily uses blended finance vehicles in Central America, South America, and several countries in Africa. We're planning to invest in India as well pretty soon. So the impact investors focus is usually first on impact, but making sure that there are returns as well. Now, having said this, the main archetypes and instruments of blended finance are represented here, and there are four different structures that are commonly used, and I'm going to discuss those. The first one is the public or the philanthropic investors who provide funds on a below market terms within the capital structure to lower the overall cost of capital or to provide an additional layer of protection to private investors. And this usually is called as a concessional capital. The second structure usually provides or has bonds or notes are issued often for infrastructure projects, and philanthropic investors provide credit enhancements through guarantees or insurance on below market terms. And this structure, number two, is usually called as a guarantee or risk insurance structure. The third structure, and we have in my company used this third structure quite a bit. It's the transactions is associated with grant funded technical assistance facility that can be utilized before or after investment to strengthen the commercial viability and development of developmental impact. And so you have a debt, equity, and then you have a TA facility that goes along with it. And throughout the structure, the TA facility plays a very significant, important role. And the next slide, I would like to talk a little bit about what is technical assistance facility and why is it important in the blended finance. And then the fourth structure in this slide, it's grant funding that comes from public or philanthropic sources. And this is usually to design or structure projects to attract institutional investments. And again, it plays a pretty significant role in the blended finance because it's the capital that you do not have to return. It helps you to leverage your interest further. So let me talk a little bit about the technical assistance facility and the framework that I have been creating at my workplace. Technical assistance, again, is extremely crucial in blended finance as it provides additional support beyond just the capital investment. It helps to build local capacity. And during our due diligence process, we make sure that the investee company that we are looking into, they have a technical assistance role or they have a technical assistance piece to it. And we consider that as one of the most important mitigating risk factor because now you're creating capacity that's going to make sure that you're able to scale your impact through the investments that are made. Few things that we look into are if it's going to provide any additionality in achieving impact goals, if this technical assistance facility is going to support, provide any resources or expertise, which are very important. For instance, think about if you're providing, and this is an ag sector, imagine that, and you're creating an organic farming facility. There's a lot of technical assistance that is required because most farmers won't even know what and how to start with organic farming and how do you get the certification and how do you get the seeds and what the best irrigation facility or is needed. And so providing this expertise and resources and support are very crucial for the success of the project. And that's the reason we look into the technical assistance facility as one of the important parts for our due diligence. And then, of course, the acceleration, does this help accelerate the growth in its operation? There can be different implementations of technical assistance facility. It can be for the capacity building, as I mentioned earlier. It can be for market access. For instance, we have seen, and I have worked significantly on gender lens investing. We have seen that many women do not have the network to actually take their product to the final destination. And so providing market access in this case is extremely important. And a technical assistance facility can allow you to not just provide the network to make your project successful, but also help with project development. They can help with the market access. They can help with adaptation to local context. For instance, you know that a particular investment or a project can work in, let's say, Costa Rica, but if you're trying to bring that project to Nigeria, how are you going to make sure that that happens, and that you really need people who have knowledge about the local geography, about all the basics of the local context, or finding access to I mean, that allows you to increase the likelihood of the success of that project. And so technical assistance facility, as I move forward in my presentation, make sure that you keep this lens with you. Um, uh, it's going to be important to relate it to something later that I'm going to talk about. I'm sorry, I did not bring this slide, but here we are. I would like to talk about the importance of blended finance. And again, coming back to the whole idea behind blended finance and impact investment, the Sustainable Development Goals are set by United Nations, and there are 17 of these global goals that aim to tackle a range of issues, from combating climate change to ending poverty. And the SDGs aim to create a more sustainable world while offering real business opportunities. So to achieve the SDGs, a significant scale up of investment is required today. And the current levels of development financing are not really sufficient. Um, it's estimated that about 4.2 trillion funding gap per annum is there if we want to realize the SDGs in developing countries alone. And so blended finance is a very critical approach or vehicle to mobilize new sources of capital for the SDGs, because it highly aligns with the UN SDGs. For example, clean water and sanitation, we have an excellent blended finance vehicle in Central America right now, and we see how it is working excellent in Honduras and El Salvador. Similarly, the renewable energy vehicle, we have it with a company called Nithio in 7 different countries in Africa, where we're trying to provide funding to rooftop solar companies. And they are providing a cheaper renewable energy to the people who are off grid. Similarly, gender equality, and then most of the funding, when you're providing funding to SMEs, it allows the people to have better jobs and economic growth. And so these are some of the most important and easiest achievable UN SDGs through blended finance. So if you look at impact investors, their focus on blended finance have been primarily in 2 different areas. First is they focus on developing economies. And the reason is they understand that the developing economies face significant challenges, including low level of access to safe drinking water, sanitation, we call it WASH, lack of physical infrastructure, high level of pollution. And so blended finance can create investment opportunities in developing countries. And so that is the landscape where most impact investors feel they can actually help. And then second thing is catalyzing the private investment. And so other important stakeholders and initiatives such as OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, as well as DFI's working group on blended concessional finance for private sector projects. Um, Working with them, it includes the use of capital from development finance institutes and working closely with OECD or DFI, a working group, allows you to coordinate blended finance activities in a much better fashion. And so coming back to the three main characteristics of blended finance. The first and foremost is that the transaction should contribute towards achieving the SDGs. And again, not every participant needs to have the development objective, but private investors in a blended finance structure may simply be seeking a market rate financial return. But the way you bring different parties together, um, some seeking market rate financial returns, some seeking impact, together they actually are able to contribute towards achieving SDGs. And so that is the main characteristic of a blended finance. Secondly, the overall transaction is expected to yield a positive financial return. Different investors in a blended finance structure will have different return expectations, ranging from concessional to market rate. But again, the goal is to have a positive financial return. And then lastly, the participation from different parties, public and philanthropic parties, it becomes catalytic to improve the risk and return profile of transaction to attract participation from private sector. And that's how you actually are able to mitigate the risk and get the most out of blended finance. Any questions so far before I dive into one of our blended finance example?
Feel free to unmute, or if you would rather, you can put your questions in the chat.
All good? All right.
Hi, I had a quick question. Hi, so my name is Siam. I'm from George Washington University. If you could go back a couple of slides.
Okay. Let me know.
Yeah, right here. So I was wondering if you could just quickly explain. So the first two boxes, the box covers both commercial debt equity, concessional capital, and then for the second one, guarantee insurance and debt equity. For third and fourth, is there a reason why like the box is just for debt equity
Outside.
and then yeah,
Yeah,
why is it
good
separate?
question. So, you know what we have seen, and again, it is not 100%, it should be like this. We have seen, and I'm going to cover one of my slide, which has a TA facility. What we have seen is that sometimes the TA facility or the technical assistance facility is not a part of the structure. So basically the funding that you're providing is not going to the TA facility directly. The TA facility is getting funding from somewhere else. It can be grant funded, but it is not a part of the structure itself. And it can be a part of the structure. So I can squeeze in the TA facility inside the big structure. And my example that I'm going to share later, you will see how it is done in that case. Similarly, the grant. The grant can be a part of the structure or it can be outside the structure. Usually the way the grants also work is that you are not, so let's take an example. If the market rate is 5% and I'm issuing a debt at 6%, and I am trying to make sure that eventually the investee, because they come from underprivileged background, or they are coming in from a developing economies, we want to make sure that we are not providing them with the capital which is what usually the banks are providing. Many of these people are unbanked. Many of these people don't have any uh, they usually are not even able to get any bank loans because they don't have a credit history, several other reasons, right? And so you're providing them loan at a lower rate of interest than what the banks are providing. If you have a grant money, that you do not have to return the capital, right? It is automatically going to bring the entire money that has to be, the principal is going to be smaller, right? And so that significantly helps the investee because they now are less burdened, and you create a structure, let's say 5-year structure, such that now you're letting every year the way the investments are done and the way you're returning the interest, you scale it on at 5 years, but you are giving them a break from the grant. Similar to the TA facility, many of the TA facilities are grant funded, they are not part of the structure, which allows a lot of learning, as I mentioned earlier, to happen, all the hand holding that the investee companies need outside the structure. And so these, as I said, I mean, these are just the 4 main types. You can be as creative as you want in blended finance. There is no set rules, as long as you're able to work with the country that you're working with, that it falls in the right borders, and that you're not violating any requirements. This is all okay. Like a lot of times USAID or they provide grants for water. There is a water equity fund that can provide grants, and so these grants in number 4 would play a very important role, and they are outside the structure of the debt and equity. And your debt and equity can be 60-40% depending on how you want to structure it.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So basically it's like the structure is debt and equity, but the TA facility or the technical assistance can be added into that. And the
Yes.
prep design grant can also be added into that in a
Yeah,
different model.
let me share uh, the slide that I was going to discuss after this point. And I think you will see this is one of the blended finance vehicle that we are creating at this point. And we use this, you'll see it is used as a force multiplier. It combines multiple funding sources to achieve a greater impact. And so in this, you will see we have this big blended finance model, but the TA is outside. It is funded by donor capital, donor grant capital. And then in the water fund that I'm talking about here, that is the capital structure, in which we have 70% of senior debt capital that would be coming from DFIs or corporates, foundations. And then there's a 20% which would be coming from the first loss subordinate catalytic capital, and that can be funded by, again, donor grant capital. And last, the 10% is the concessional capital. And so that water fund is separate from the TA fund. The TA fund is donor grant capital. And by combining the concessional capital and the impact of the commercial finance expands the funding capacity, as you can see, because the concessional or the subordinate capital can be used both as a tool to absorb risk and provide yield protection. And it can address market gaps through the provision of technical assistance, because technical assistance, as I mentioned, and I dedicated an entire slide on it. When you start working in the developing economies, you realize that a lot of infrastructure is missing, a lot of knowledge, expertise is missing. And so that's how you can use that donor grant capital towards, creating that capacity. And this particular blended finance vehicle, we combine, I think its capacity is about 25 million as entering the market. And I can discuss a little bit more about it real quick though. So you will see in this structure, the commitment spans over a 5-year period, with a timeline displayed on the right side of the table. And the expected annualized return is 4.1%, which is pretty low, but in the WASH facility, when you have grant capital, this is impact investment. So usually this is, you run from 4 to 6%, somewhere around that ballpark. And the annual drawdown is structured as follows. For year one, there will be 3 million. Year two will be 4 million, 3, 4, 5 will be 5, 6, and 7 million respectively. And the total, the first column, the total will amount to about 25 million. So the share of investor A and other debt will stand at 60% to 40% respectively, with the draws adjusted to match their proportions as we go from 5 million in this 5-year subordinate debt at approximately 3%. So you'll have to do all the calculations, and I'm not showing those here. But the grant money is fully invested in 1 year. And again, that 2.5 million is very important because that's the one that you're not going to return, right? The company draws only from investor A funding in year one, and then the subsequent draw pari passu from the senior and the subordinate debts. So, usually when you're creating the blended finance structures, you have to rely on, as I said earlier, different sources of capital, and then making sure that the risks are mitigated properly. And so I would like to next talk about something really important, which is about impact investment and theory of change. And the reason I would like to bring this up here is, when I was taking this course and I was, doing the challenge, what you folks are doing right now, I also did a certification with the Wharton School of Management for impact investment, and that was through Keenan Flagler School. And I learned a lot from that 6-month course. Tracy, are we still doing that? We are?
Oh, yes, that's Mint. It's
Yeah,
MBA Impact Investing, Networking and Training.
Right.
Yes, so that's
Yeah,
still
and I wanted to share my experience with Mint, and I'm very thankful that I was able to do Mint because I learned a lot about the theory of change and all these importance of theory of change in impact investment. And so I would like to cover that because probably that will help you in your competition as well. So theory of change refers to a detailed description that outlines how a set of activities and interventions will lead to a specific long-term goal or outcome. And it really serves as a roadmap that guides impact investors in navigating the very complex social and environmental impact landscape, making sure that the investments are really, you're able to measure their impact. You're actually able to drive positive change. And in my company, we are going to start issuing notes program starting this spring quarter. I was responsible for putting together theory of change for our notes program. And it enabled me to go back to the drawing board and understand, okay, what is the vision? What is the problem that we are dealing with? What is the mission statement? Why, what are we trying to really achieve? And then what are the outcomes? If we are able to do the required set of things, then what are the outcomes? And usually the way you create theory of changes, you have inputs. You first define the problem statement, then you have inputs, and you look at what the outcomes are. And then from the outcomes, you try to understand what the impact is out of it. And so for us, the problem that we are trying to address is a scarcity of affordable capital that impedes the expansion of proven interventions. And we always go after something that is being proven. We do not do seed funding or pre-seed funding. We always, our investees are the ones who already have proven their product. And then who are trying to provide underserved communities with vital support, and that is a problem. And our mission is to mobilize high impact capital that can sustainably scale proven models to deliver basic human needs. Again, basic human needs is what we are focused on. So basic human needs is clean water and sanitation and, basic healthcare. That is the basic human needs that we are trying to address. So somebody else who is trying to focus on only environmental issues will not have basic human needs. They will have different terminology. They will have a different set of mission, which is, okay, I would like to bring the greenhouse gas emissions down. Those will be their mission or their vision as compared to what we have. So ours is, along with environmental, we are focused significantly on the social aspect of it. Um, and through all this interventions, we strongly believe that the outcome will be a reputable implementer can now reliably obtain the capital that is required to scale their efforts, and investors can effectively. So this is interesting that you should note here. We are not just saying that you will be able to scale the efforts and provide impact. We're also saying that the investors can effectively fund initiatives aimed at making the world a better place, but they will be getting returns. So this is not philanthropic, right? And this is the distinction between, there are several different, you can do impact investing, but before that is philanthropy. Then after impact investing is where you're doing responsible investing, which is very different than ESG investing, which is very different. And so, we have to understand what is impact investing again. Focus is on impact. I would like to talk a bit about the impact thesis, because after impact, after theory of change, you come to what is your impact thesis, and setting guiding principles that articulate the intended social, environmental, or governance outcomes any investor is trying to seek is very important. And as I mentioned earlier, for us, it is the basic human needs. Like a green fund, it would be environmental, right? It also goes beyond financial returns and outlines the positive contributions an investment is expected to make to a broader societal and environmental goals. And so usually people have 5 to 6 guiding principles when they are creating their impact thesis. And I'm not sure in your competition currently that's what you're trying to do, but we were trying to do, for the Mint project, for instance, we were trying to even create an impact thesis, because that is important to narrow down what your focus is going to be, right? There can be 50 different companies. When you're doing due diligence, how do you make sure that out of these 50 companies, 10 are the ones that actually fit in your impact thesis, right? And so that is very important to make sure that you first sit down and put that together. In our case, we decided that, we want to make sure that the investee company, what is the geographic or sectoral diversification? For instance, we are aiming at 90% global, maybe 10% US based companies. It has to have impact measurement and reporting. The investee company should have that. A local empowerment, so support of community engagement, fostering partnership, make sure that they have sustainable scaling, and then their proven models. This is, as I mentioned earlier, a very important part for us, because we want to invest in successful initiatives with potential to be replicated or scaled to reach bigger masses. And then, of course, collaborative ecosystem is something that we are looking for, because actively engaging with impact-driven organizations to leverage resources and expertise and maximizing our collective impact, that's the TA facility that I spoke about earlier. And so, there are several impact investment frameworks that you can choose from. And as we start diving into those frameworks, you will come to know that there are just too many that are available. Now, I come from electrical engineering background, as I mentioned, and spending 24 years in that sector, my mindset is a little bit different. You have IEEE standards, and the entire world works with the IEEE standards. And then I moved to impact investment space, and there are so many different reporting and measuring and impact frameworks, and I'm confused. And I'm thinking to myself, why is there no standardization, right? But I'm hoping that, as this field evolves and grows and matures, there will be more standardization. Um, the beauty is that it again allows you to have more flexibility. And, we decided to choose the sustainable investment framework that was developed by Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And the approach converts the UN SDGs into measurable indicators that are easily understood and feasible for investors to implement across six impact themes. And so this framework has divided the UN SDGs into basic needs, decent work, well-being, climate stability, healthy ecosystem, and resource security. So these are the six sectors that the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership divided the UN SDGs into. And it becomes then easier for investors to look into, okay, what are the basic needs? And will that provide, so you will see how, clean water and sanitation or renewable energy, that is all in the basic needs. And once you're able to look into the impact themes, that allows you to go next step, which is how do you make sure? So I want to talk a little bit about the gender lens investment here, because I spoke about the impact thesis, but when you're applying it to gender lens, how does it change, right? Not sure how many women we have on on today's call, but um, I have really enjoyed my work looking into the gender lens investment. And the guiding principles that drive the fund's investments and strategies and women-led SMEs to achieve positive and measurable outcome is to promote gender equality, climate resilience, digital transformation, and women's empowerment. And these were the four fundamental things that I thought were very important that should be achieved um, through a gender lens investment. The financial inclusion would ensure that the women-led SMEs have improved access to financial products and services. I recently was in India and I saw how everybody has a cell phone these days. And through the cell phones, you're actually able to, even if you're unbanked, you're able to actually do the transactions. And now, because of these transactions, they are getting cash right away, which is very important. And I feel that for women, if you're doing gender lens investment, the digital transformation and inclusion is comes as a very important part. Now, similarly, technical assistance allows you to build digital skills, climate literacy, financial and digital inclusion, guidance on best practices, addressing the barriers. So, there are multiple layers when you start looking into each each of the impact thesis for why you're creating it. And as I said earlier, once you decide that this is going to be your lens, then you're able to break it down into what all things you want to make sure are covered. Um, so touching a little bit on impact measurement and management strategy, the most impact investment firms are signatories of principles of responsible investing, PRI, which is a set of aspirational investment principles, and that's endorsed by United Nations. And PRI usually is the one that you use for screening and due diligence. These principles provide a framework for integrating environmental, social, and governance factors into the investing decisions that you make. And also integral to the investment measurement and management practices is the IRIS Plus. I'm not sure how many people know IRIS Plus here, but that and the IMP, the Impact Management Project Framework, it enables them to meticulously measure and manage the impact data. And, we make sure that the investee impact is validated really early in the cycle. It is important for the impact investment funds to utilize a very rigorous approach to assess and measure the impact generated by investee companies, because there definitely is a lot of greenwashing, and you want to make sure that you don't fall in that trap. So throughout the due diligence process, since this is impact investment, impact becomes the first focus or first due diligence part of the entire process. Most impact investors, they create their framework where they define, describe, and gauge the impact of investee process to validate the impact data, which is then integrated into impact reports reflecting the firm's dedication to sustainable and impact-driven investing. And so these are the different 7 steps that we go through. We screen initial impact assessment and due diligence and established impact metrics and goals. And again, establishing those are very important, right? You need to have a baseline. And then once you have a baseline, you try to figure out how the investment is going to enable you to come to a different target of impact. And then you also try to do on-site evaluations and audits. The stakeholders and engagement feedback is very important in, again, measuring the impact, and then continuously monitoring and improving. So it's like a feedback loop, right? You get the feedback from the end beneficiaries, and then you try to understand what is missing, what is lagging, where are the shortcomings. You try to fix those, and then again do the impact assessment. And this should go all the way till the exit. So if it is going to be a 5-year fund, make sure that this is continuously monitored till the exit, and then you even understand at the exit point, how do you make sure that you're not losing the impact and that it stays in the group or in the sector where you're working. And I'm on the last slide, so and this is going to be real quick to show how we actually measure the impact. So I know that Jeff is going to cover it, but this is something that I have put together for all our investees. We established the impact target aligning investee impact with UN SDGs. So for instance, as I mentioned, Nithio, it is in renewable energy, and so UN SDG 7 is the impact target, but then there are secondary UN SDGs that affect also. Then we identify the impact KPIs, the key performance indicators, using IRIS Plus. IRIS Plus is a widely recognized and adopted set of standards and metrics in the impact investing space. It plays a very crucial role by providing a common language for impact measurement and reporting. It supports transparency and facilitate informed decision-making by impact investors. So you will see in the second column, we identify the impact, the KPIs, and the KPIs have to be quantitative and qualitative. We want to make sure that we are able to set them very clear. They should be measurable. They shouldn't be, very, like when I say measurable, you want to make sure that I will be providing 10,000 people with clean water over the period of next 2 quarters, or over the period of next 1 year. That is a measurable impact. And then making sure that you start with a baseline measurement, as I mentioned earlier, and then target the measurement to track the progress of the impact, because this will allow you to assess if the investment is contributing the expected impact or not. And so this is the entire cycle of how the impact investment works, especially from the lens of blended finance. Any questions? I hope everybody is awake.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
If you have several private investors, do you usually have a single transparent interest rate for all the finances coming? Or it could be different, and in this case, you're not transparent, whatever best rate you can negotiate?
A very good question. So for the notes program, we are trying to make sure that we stick to our 6% interest rate. that we will be giving to our investee. And we are going to stick to a particular interest that we'll be giving back to our investors. And I'm glad you brought this question up, because what we are seeing is we are giving we are giving fundings to FIs, the financial institutes, that eventually, so there is another layer between us and the beneficiaries, right? And the FIs are actually giving it to the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises. Each of them, depending on which country you are in, are giving it at a different rate. And so the temptation is that why should I be giving capital at 6% if they are giving capital to the end beneficiaries at 12%, right? And that becomes a part of our due diligence. We want to make sure that the beneficiaries are getting capital at the low rate of interest. So first we figure out in that particular country, what is the standard rate of interest that is going on right now, and that we make sure that that rate is not higher than what these investees are giving. But at the same time, what our company has decided is we are not going to negotiate on the interest rate depending on what the FIs are giving to their beneficiaries. Because there are several cases, for instance, there are several countries in Africa where that number is pretty high. And by providing concessional capital, you actually are enabling money to be provided to people who really are in need of it. Given the political risk that they have, given a lot of other environmental risks that they go through, that's the reason they have a higher margin. And so we try to keep our rates very standard across actually the countries. We do some hedging and all, but yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Good question. All right, who else has some questions for Anagha? Well, we have her for a few more minutes here.
I was wondering, this isn't that much of like an open-ended question, but more so like, what are the different, you mentioned Iris Plus, there were a couple others of like measurement strategies, right? So could you just mention them again?
Yeah, so what we have seen is we are working with developing economies who actually do not have infrastructure and resources to use any of these frameworks. These frameworks actually are working really well in countries like us, right? Because each time you have a third validator, or you are trying to access any of these frameworks, for instance, there's a charge, right? And so several of our investees that we see that are working in remote coffee plantation, for instance, in South America, they do not have these frameworks. But what we do is they are actually using NGOs who are actually doing the real measurement of impact. And so they provide their impact reports to us quarterly basis. And then from that, we try to align those quantitative and qualitative values to the Iris Plus. So they are not using Iris Plus, we are using Iris Plus. We try to align those impact numbers to the Iris Plus numbers, and then we use those as our guideline to report as well as measure. Now, along with Iris, for instance, Iris is or like the PRA, the principal reporting investment. There are there are several others that I have. It's one of them is the IMP, the Impact Management Project, and the IMP actually is very well defined. It talks about who, what, how, and when you say who, how, what, you're actually trying to understand who are the beneficiaries, right? Are these the beneficiaries who are probably from an indigenous tribe? Are these the beneficiaries who come from low income level? Are these so you basically define the beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? How are you able to provide them? What? So using the what, then you're actually trying to quantify what you're trying to do through this impact vehicle. And so IMP, Impact Management Project, I feel is another really good monitoring and collecting data framework. For the screening and due diligence, usually it's the PRI that most people use. And then when you're trying to do the strategy or creating investment strategy and goals, several companies, they just focus on UN SDGs. As I mentioned, we use the University of Cambridge model, but that aligns with the UN SDGs. So, it fits pretty well. Now, outside impact investment, if you look at ESG, then there are just several monitoring and measurement like SASB and CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project. All these are the reporting and the measurement frameworks that can be used.
Okay, thank you. And also, this isn't exactly related to the conversation we're having right now, but I was wondering if, after this session, if I could reach out to you over email about an opportunity that's happening at my university. It's like a impact investing conference. It's like end of March. So if, I could send you some details about that. That's
Sure.
okay.
Honestly, I don't mind people reaching out. So I'll just put down my email here, and this is my personal email. I'm not giving you my work email, but yeah, you can reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Sure.
I also put links in the chat to Iris Plus, that's through on the GIN, as well as the impact management project.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, do check out the chat for those.
Yeah, and the Iris is it's the baby of the GIN, and GIN has done all the heavy lifting. So definitely look into the GIN for sure. Oh, this is so cool.
Pooja, you have a question?
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for like the detailed breakdown of all of the blended finance techniques. I think this was super insightful. One question I had, so I know you mentioned earlier about how currently you're working on something related to like rooftop solar and how that's providing cheaper renewable energy for those who live like off the grid. So I was just wondering if you can provide a little more like details into that project, and also what sorts of blended finance techniques did you use for that?
So I think I can't tell you a little like too much about the blended finance part because it's still under construction. But the one that we already have funded, the company's name is Neatio. And if you go on Total Impact Capital's website, you will see we have a few case studies. One of them is Neatio. So Neatio is the parent company that funds a lot of off-grid solar companies. When I was a student at Keenan Flagler, I interviewed the CEO of a company called Solar Panda. So if you're interested in renewable energy, especially in countries in Africa, I'll definitely recommend you to read about Solar Panda. I interviewed them and I used it for one of my, I think it was the entrepreneurship class that I was taking, elective, at Keenan Flagler. And I used that as as a case study for one of my classes. And it was a beautiful learning experience. And now at Total, it feels like a full circle, right? Because now we're investing in Neatio that invest in Solar Panda, okay? So as I mentioned, we actually invest, so we have, like, we don't directly invest in Solar Panda, we invest in Neatio, and Neatio is the one that invests in a lot of other rooftop solar model companies. So two things, Pooja, look into Total Impact Capital's website for Neatio, a case study. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Secondly, check out Solar Panda. They have a very interesting rooftop solar model so just briefly, I don't know how much time we have, Tracy. I don't mind going over for a few minutes. So the way it works is the solar rooftop models, these are all off-grid customers, right? There is no infrastructure in where they live, and they have a solar rooftop which is connected to their light bulbs. If you have more money, you buy the next level, which allows you to get your lights and radio. And you have more money, then you do lights and radio and TV. And so you have these different levels depending on how much money you have and how much money you can pay on a daily basis. And their repayment structure is very interesting. It's digital. And I think it's something like, you pay 99 cents every day. Let's say if you have a TV, radio, and 4 bulbs in your house. You stop paying, you get a 4-day grace period, and then the connection is automatically cut if you're not able to make the payments. I think over the period of 8 years or something, 7 years, eventually you are going to own the solar rooftop and all the other electronic equipment that came with it. A very interesting model, for developing economies who do not have access to any of these basic facilities that we actually take it for granted, right? And they use blended finance, as I said, but they actually heavily rely on, there is a certification called GOGLA, G-O-G-L-A, and it is for renewable energy. It's sort of like a TA facility that I spoke about earlier. So they provide funding, expertise to companies like Solar Panda to make sure that they are able to address their customers' needs. And we invested in Nethio. Now, Nethio actually use data analytics. How many people actually are in data analytics or have taken enough courses? Okay. So, given my background in engineering, I focused a lot on Nethio's analytics because that is their brain. And it's very interesting how they use geospatial data to figure out what is going to be the default rate, for instance, of the end user who will be getting funding from Solar Panda. And this is, it's very interesting how they're using technology to actually understand the repayment or even the cash flows of a company. And then how do you think, how will they be repaying on a weekly basis, monthly basis? And maybe somebody will use 5 years and somebody will use 3 years and somebody will use 7 years to make the repayments. And that's how they decide what the interest rates will be. It's a very interesting model, but Nethio is heavily based on analytics. I worked with their R&D team understanding when we were doing the due diligence. So they will be a part of our notes program. That's the whole idea.
Thank you so much. That was super insightful, and I'll definitely look into the links in the chat as well.
Okay, all the best.
Hi, I have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead. Is it,
Okay.
tell me your name?
It's Ian.
Ian, okay.
Yeah.
So it's Ian. Ian. Yeah,
Yeah,
please, go
hi.
ahead.
Yeah, it's been really cool hearing about all of your your all these points, and right now our group is at a point where we're looking at all these different strategies and all these ways to actually go about demonstrating our plan or our vision. And I think for me personally, this might be actually somewhat of a silly question, but we have all these ideas on maybe partnering with different companies or different sectors of industry to get something done. But when we're writing about it in a proposal or we're going about trying to present it in a proposal, how would you recommend maybe like conceptualizing that and putting that idea onto the actual slides? Like, should we go about maybe saying that our vision would entail reaching out to these stakeholders in these industries, or would we imagine that they're already on board? Like, what would be
Yeah, I
a
know what
logical step forward? Yeah.
No, I think so when I was going through our, theory of change,
Mhm.
you assume that they are on board. Okay.
Okay, okay,
And
that's
so
super
you
helpful.
use the language, you formulate it such that you're saying that they are on board.
Okay, perfect.
Confidence, saying that, if,
Yeah.
by doing so and so, we will be able to achieve this and this. Yeah.
Okay, so like going forward to the proposal, kind of illustrating just how great the impact, the outcomes can be going along a certain plan.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that
Yeah,
makes a
so
lot of sense.
starting with, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So what
Mhm.
is the problem? What is the challenge? And then this is how, and then you just flow into this is how it's gonna happen. And these companies are
Got
gonna
it.
do this, and this is gonna happen, and
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That answered it perfectly. Thank you.
yeah, this is not something where I mean, we do have some groups, some teams that actually are doing adventure, but most of this is an opportunity for you all to look at how would you put something like this together from like on a theoretical type of basis. So, yeah,
I
it's,
highly recommend, and I don't know what the timeline is, Tracy, but I still feel like you should try to figure out a real problem and try
yeah,
to check, like connect with somebody, because I think that'll give you a really amazing experience. For instance, when I was doing the what is it, India
India Impact
Impact
Challenge.
Investment,
Mhm.
yeah, um, we actually worked with several, like, we shortlisted several companies and then decided to go with one. And when we interviewed them several times to understand, we learned a lot from that whole process. Then we were able to fit it into this, like, because a lot of times, otherwise everything becomes very hypothetical,
Yeah.
so my project was, and I am still in touch with Tracy, those guys. I'm actually advisor for this company. It's in the EV sector. It's a battery swapping model that they're using for a three-wheeler in India. And, if you start with very hypothetical project, then, you really don't know the real problems that they're encountering. But as we started working with them, and I was actually trying to understand real time what their real issues are and how is it difficult for them to get customers on, like, customer acquisition is such a big thing, right? How are you going to make sure? That's when you realize what really needs to be done. And, again, from the impact investment perspective, making sure, like in this case, the auto rickshaw drivers, what are their challenges? Are they
Mhm.
getting insurance? Okay, so that this is an impact investment, right? So you want to make sure that all these things become a part of that impact investment vehicle, that you are able to provide them with a better livelihood. You are able to provide them with insurance. You're able to provide them, with the healthcare facilities that are lacking in several places. So, bringing everything together with a real world problem is will help you significantly, I feel.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Pooja, did you have?
Yeah, one super quick follow-up. So in places where maybe the government might be like not on board with some particular idea or like project, how would you recommend going about it? Because in our proposal, the place we're working in, it seems like the government would probably be against our idea because of some political things going on. So how would you recommend going about that?
It's very interesting you raise this, because you have to make sure that all the stakeholders are on the same page. And in this case, the government, right? The local government. Um, I would not recommend you going against the government, and so you'll have to find a way. And this is something that we dealt with during the Mint competition. That there are some states in India that do not allow the lead-based batteries for electric vehicles as compared to the lithium batteries. And you have to make sure that the local government as well as the national government, they both are on board. So I don't see how you would be able to navigate without them being a part of, this. Uh, we had a couple of projects that we have been discussing in Africa. And again, you want to make sure that the Ministry of Health, let's say if that is the one of the stakeholders, they are on board. Without them, I think you might be violating the rules, and you don't want to get into that gray area.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, this
Okay.
is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really a great synopsis of a lot of aspects of this. And thank you all for being here today and asking really good questions. And join me in thanking Anagha for her time. And yes, we look forward to seeing you all next Friday. And remember, it's between 8:30 to 4:30. You can pop in at any time. I'll send out some more information via email. And look forward to seeing you all then, getting those submissions done.
All the best. See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.